Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Minister of Youth and Sports. He's currently a co-host of Malaysia's top podcast, Keluar Sekejap, and is a seasoned Hot FM radio announcer. He's a man of many talents and expertise. Please join us in welcoming Mr. Khairy Jamaluddin to the stage.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to everyone. Datuk Kamalanathan, who invited me to say a few words. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me this afternoon. What a wonderful session just now. Had fun listening to it. Of course, my boss, Jake, and my newfound idol, Datuk Kelvin, in the pink suit. I love that suit. I'm going to get a pink suit myself. I have been asked to speak a little bit about what I know on communications and public relations. I know that there is a lot of talk in your industry about accreditation, about potentially regulation, and these are some of the hot topic items that you've been discussing as an industry. I thought I would just share with you my perspective on your industry, how I treat public relations and communications, and my thoughts on what the development of this industry would be like going forward, and perhaps my own personal story related to communications and public relations. First of all, as a minister, as somebody who was in government, whenever it came to engaging people to advise us about communications and public relations, many people would say that this is the soft part of the engagement. These are soft skills. And I increasingly, and you have to remember that I was in government from 2013. And I went through a few ministries. I went through big events, tumultuous events, which required good communications and good public relations. When I was at the Ministry of Youth and Sports in 2013 to 2018, amongst other things, we hosted the 2017 Southeast Asia Games, or SEA Games. So that's a huge setup event, where you need to get the public relations right, you need to get the communications right, in terms of branding, in terms of galvanizing the nation to support our athletes, in terms of motivating the athletes themselves to perform and to make sure that we win the targeted number of gold medals, in terms of crisis communications and managing crisis. And we had crises on almost a daily basis when we were hosting the SEA Games, from upside down flags to national anthems being played in the wrong order, small things like that. And they're inevitably magnified and amplified because of social media. 2017, we already had Facebook, we had what then was known as Twitter, now known as X. Thankfully, we didn't have TikTok, otherwise it would have been worse. So that was at the Ministry of Youth and Sports. And then many of you remember that I came back into government as Minister of Science, and then I became the Minister of Health. But along the way, I became the Minister in charge for much of the response to the pandemic, especially vaccinations. And that, again, was crisis management on a daily basis. Everything that you could imagine that could go wrong, went wrong on a daily basis. And if you didn't have a good public relations strategy in place, then it would erode trust in the process of what you're doing. I don't want to downplay the SEA Games, but they are completely different things. The SEA Games is a nice sporting event. The pandemic is life and death. They're both important, but in terms of the scale of importance, I think you would agree in terms of life and death, the pandemic was more important. And because of that, there was no option of screwing up in terms of getting the public relations and the communications wrong when it came to making sure that people trusted you in the process. They needed to trust you to observe the SOPs. They needed to trust you to get the vaccinations. And they needed to trust you when you said that it was okay to open the country and open the economy. And if you didn't have a strategy in place that was rooted in trust, even though you make mistakes on a daily basis, even though you drop the ball, then we would not have come out of this amongst the quickest countries in Southeast Asia. So for that, I know many of you, almost all of you are Malaysians here during the crisis, here during the pandemic. Thank you for listening to what I had to say, and thank you for doing as I suggested you do. And because of that, we got out of it. So thank you for that. And because of that, because of my experience with communications and with having a public relations strategy in place, some of it we brought in people from the outside, some of it we did in-house. I think it has to be a bit of both. I think you can't rely 100% on external consultants and contractors. I think there's a feel that people from the outside don't have, and that's what I call the political nous. That's what politicians are supposed to have. If you're a good politician, you have that feel. You know when things are about to go wrong. You know when they go wrong, what to do. Some ministers don't have that, obviously. But that's the mark of a good politician. It's the political instinct that you have. But a politician doesn't have all the tools in his toolkit. And this is when you need people like you, the PR experts, public relations practitioners, communications experts to come in and tell us. We may have the instinct, we may know where and which direction we want to go to, but you come and tell us what the data points are. Once the data points are established, you help us craft that message because you know how to craft that message. You tell us in a crisis what we need to do first. We may have an instinct of what we want to do, but it may not be the right thing to do first. That's why over time I said, can we stop referring to communications and public relations as a soft skill? It's not soft to me. In fact, if anything, it's strategic and smart. And it's strategic and smart for me, in my experience, as somebody who has been in government, because it gets you to where you want to go. I mean, I know where I want to go. As somebody who's entrusted in government by the voters, I know where I want to go. I want to win the SEA Games. I want to create this national mood of celebration after the SEA Games, after the ASEAN Paralympic Games, so that Malaysians feel good about themselves, so that there's this legacy of the SEA Games, of people wanting to become healthier, fitter, of just people feeling happier. I had a mission. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew where my true north was. During the pandemic, I wanted to get out as quickly as possible. I remember when Prime Minister Ismail Sabri appointed me as Health Minister, the first thing he said to me was, I'm going to move you to the Health Ministry. Please sort out COVID. Okay? And he said, I don't want to have any more lockdowns. So I already knew. The true north was I had to sort this thing out, and I had to make sure that no more lockdowns. And I had to make sure that we opened up the borders within 6 months. And that's what we needed to do. But without the advice of experts, I could not go where I wanted to go. So you guys help get people to where they want to go. Secondly, it presents you as you want to be seen and heard. You cannot imagine that what people see of you is exactly what you want people to see. That's a mistake of imagining that you have self-awareness. You cannot imagine that what you are presenting is what people are seeing and hearing. Only an expert will be able to tell you exactly what people see and hear. You want people to see and hear you in a particular way. During the pandemic, I wanted to be seen as someone who was empathetic, someone who was decisive, someone who was knowledgeable, because I was a non-doctor at the Ministry of Health. I cannot have that self-awareness because I'm in the first person. So I need people around me who would honestly tell me, hey KJ, that press conference was just bad. You fumbled your lines, you were not empathetic, you were too hard on anti-vaxxers, you should show some humility, and we course correct along the way. And that's where you guys come in. That's why we have to listen to the expert. We have to listen to you. Because we cannot imagine what people are hearing and seeing is what we want them to do. And third, it safeguards your brand and ideas in a world of unregulated contestations. Right now, and I'll get into it in a bit, there's just too much contestation about what's right, what's wrong, ideas going around. Your brand, your ideas, your policies are so important. That's your crown jewel. And if you don't get the right people with the smarts and the strategic vision to be able to protect, nurture that brand, those ideas and your policies in a world of terrible, terrible noise, then you're going to lose out and not get where you want to go. And again, drawing on my experience from being your health minister, there was a lot of misinformation about the vaccines. And this is a perfect example of contestation. People were saying it's not safe. Why are you taking the mRNA vaccine? It's not been proven. It's just been developed over 3 months. How can you put this in your body? We don't know what the side effects are like. So we need to rely on people to tell us, one, the science. That's, of course, the public health experts and people who develop the vaccines. But you come in by telling us, how do you convince an audience? How do you allay people's fears so that they understand that although this has been developed in a few months, it's different from the development of vaccines over the last 30 to 40 years. Normally it takes 5 to 10 years to develop a vaccine, but for the first time ever, the world devoted its resources to developing this vaccine, and it can be done within 3 to 4 months, therefore it is safe. And that's how we got there. I read a book last year by a political scientist called Moises Naim, where he spoke about the tools that autocrats use in the present world. And it resonated with me because I think these 3 things are perhaps the greatest danger, not just to democracy, but the greatest dangers to societies as we see them today. The first thing that he identified as a tool that's being used by autocrats, and autocrats are fantastic communicators, by the way, is post-truth. We live in a world of post-truth. What is post-truth? Post-truth is where objective facts, what is the objective fact? That the sun rises in the east. That's an objective fact. Yeah? I mean, that's just a fact. But we live in a world where these objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotions and personal beliefs. Objective facts are not important anymore. It's more what you believe in. If I talk to you and I speak to your personal belief, I appeal to your personal prejudice and bias, that's more important to you than some objective fact that's out there. And that was terrible during the pandemic because we were up against personal beliefs. We were up against personal bias. How do I convince this guy who has concerns about the vaccine, who has concerns about opening the borders, compared to what I know to be facts that are delivered to me by public health officials? And post-truth is playing out as we speak today. And the greatest practitioner of post-truth has just been shot in the ear. And I mean, that's a gift from heaven for him. He's probably going to win a landslide in the election come November. But I've never seen a situation where post-truth has developed the way it has. So you imagine he got shot in the ear within hours. Within hours. It was not about rallying around moderate, insane kind of politics to say that, we are together in all of this. Biden came out with a speech, which was actually quite good. I mean, he actually spoke coherently about how he was worried. And if you notice Biden's speech, for the first time ever, he called Trump Donald. He said Donald. Normally he says Trump or President Trump or former President Trump. But he said, I'm trying to, I haven't spoken to Donald yet. Again, that's public relations 101. Guy's been shot. You don't call him Trump. You call him by his name, Donald, his first name. But, within hours, despite that olive branch that was given by Biden, the Trump machine was all over Biden, saying that Trump got shot because of Biden. Post-truth. I mean, we didn't even know who the shooter was at that point in time, but they had crafted a narrative and a story to say that Biden's hatred towards Trump, the Democrats' vilification of the Republican Party, was what set and sowed the seeds for this kind of political violence to happen. So we live in a world of post-truth, and Moses Naim said that's number one, what autocrats use. Number two, related to post-truth, is another P, which is populism. Populism is the crafting of a juxtaposition. Populism is about the people. So I'm a populist, I'm a demagogue, I'm an authoritarian. The people who I represent versus the elites, versus an enemy, it's us and them. That's what populism is. That's what Trump is telling you, regardless of the fact that he's actually rich. He was born rich. He's from New York. But he resonates with your Midwestern, Rust Belt, working class American, because he said, I'm standing up for you, regardless of the fact that I'm from the elite, and I'm here to fight for you to defeat the elite in Washington, D.C. And that's populism. Presenting yourself as a man or a woman of the people, and creating imagined or real enemy, and saying that we're going to take them down. So populism leads to the third P, which is polarization. We live in an age of huge polarization. So you see the divisiveness of society today. Not just in the United States, but even here. Every single country. It's as though the center ground has been hollowed. The middle ground has disappeared. There's no place for us to agree disagreeably. There's no place for us to come and say, okay, I disagree, let's agree to disagree. Let's say that you have your views, we have our views, but we love this nation and we want to see the nation propel. No, it's about destroying the other side. It's about taking the other side down. And this has cascaded down from politics into society. This has cascaded down from politics to brands, to corporations, where the divisiveness and the polarization is there because brands feed off that. They know this is the tendency in this demographic. This is the tendency in this demographic. So let's use it to divide people even more. And that's why it makes your profession so important today. Not to feed into this divisiveness, not to feed into this polarization, not to confirm the tendencies towards post-truth, but for us to make sense of the world and try to educate people, whether they're consumers, whether they're voters, whether they're just people, on what we feel is a reasonable view to take about the world, about brands, about politics, about government, about leaders, so we can reduce the temperature even more. I've always lived by, when it comes to communications and public relations, I'm not an expert like all of you, but I've always relied on a certain set of tools, which I just use the mnemonic TRUST, T-R-U-S-T. The first letter, T, is actually what it is, trustworthiness. You have to be as trustworthy as possible. When I was doing the vaccination campaign, I didn't know how to build that trust because I knew when I communicate, people didn't have to like me. They didn't have to be someone who voted for me or my party, but I needed them to trust me because I was doing a pretty important job during the pandemic. So I did things which I thought would engender trust. One, Pfizer came in first, and most people got Pfizer vaccine. Then Sinovac, the Chinese vaccine, came in second. A lot of people actually wanted that vaccine, but there were a large group of people who didn't trust the Chinese vaccine. What is this, Efficacy 60%, it's not going to work. So I took it upon myself to be the first to take that vaccine. And I took it live on TV. Even then, the anti-vax said I didn't take the vaccine. So I did that. Before I went to the Ministry of Health, a lot of data was not available publicly. So we presented that data. I went in and I saw that there was a trove of data on GitHub, not just about daily infections, but hospitalization, how many ventilators were being used, how many people were in ICU. So we took that data from GitHub and we presented it to people as COVID Now. It was this well-crafted website that I got the open coding community in Malaysia to do for us pro bono. And I presented as much data as possible because I believe transparency builds trust. Third, very simple. I owned up to my mistake. And that's so rare in politics. And I don't know why many other politicians don't do that. When you screw up, just say you screwed up and sorry. And I don't know if you guys remember, but when we opened up the vaccination for our third vaccine, which was AstraZeneca, because there was a problem with thrombocytopenia, which is blood clots, we decided to take it out of the mainstream program and put it in as an opt-in program, saying that if you don't have any history or indication of blood clots in your medical history, please sign up. So we took it out of the program, we took it out of the MySejahtera booking system. So you had to go onto a website to book it. I didn't know that it was going to crash. I didn't know so many people wanted it. So it crashed on the first second. We opened it, and I'm sure most of you in front of you, some people are nodding away. Remember this is the day that I cursed you for many, many generations. And it crashed. And I said sorry. I mean, I could have blamed the developer for this, I could have blamed the person who prepared the website, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with me. The buck stops with me as the minister, so I have to say sorry, and I will do better. And although, it was messy, it was noisy, it was sometimes hurtful, but that's how I think you build trust. And by owning up to where you fall short, and by communicating to say that these are the things that we want to do to make sure that we can improve and do better in the future. So that's T, trust. R, I love how Jake described Dato just now as being authentic. And R is actually all about authenticity. R is relatability. You must be relatable. I mean, if you are seen as somebody who is privileged, out of touch, you cannot convince people. People excuse some amount of privilege, but if the person is seen as completely out of touch, not aware of their privilege at all, then it's difficult to convince people what to do. And this is where I want to talk a little bit about my life post-politics. My life post-politics has taken an interesting turn. I didn't know what I was going to do after I lost the elections. I've left government before. In 2018, we lost the government, but I still won my seat in Parliament. This time around, we lost the government and I lost my seat. Some of you may know, I was asked 3 days before nomination to go to a new place, somewhere that I've never been to before. I had to reverse a deficit of 26,000 in 2 weeks. I managed to get it down to 2,000, but not enough. Not enough. I still lost. And I didn't know what to do with my life. And Jake and his friends came calling, said, "Do you want to be a radio DJ?" I thought it was a joke. I still do sometimes. But I said, okay. I started a podcast with Sharil, a friend. It's called Keluar Sekejap. We started the podcast to slag off Zahid, but now it's turned out to be a business, so it's nice. So you don't know where life's turns will take you. But I thought it was important to be authentic, if not relatable. And I want to talk to you about this TikTok dance that I'm subjected to almost on a weekly basis. I'm not a natural dancer. I mean, I was a minister, for goodness sake. And so I can't say that that's authentic. But what is relatable, I think, is that I'm trying something that I am not used to. I'm trying to get out of my comfort zone. I'm trying something. I think that's what it is, Jake. It's not, I'm not an authentic dancer. You can see that.
You've improved.
100%. Yeah? The Malay said, tak lembut, keras. I'm not an authentic dancer, but I try to be relatable because I want to try something new. I want to try something new in the face of adversity. Because I know some people have to do that. You have to take a turn in your career, learn something, do something else that's uncomfortable. Not just in your career, but in your lives. And I wanted to do that. I don't want to trivialize it by saying mine is dancing, but that's, guys, come on, I was a minister. Now I am devoid of any dignity. So you have to be relatable for the message to go through. You, so TRU, you. You is ubiquitous. Ubiquitous is a fancy word for being everywhere, all at once. And I think the message, if you are trying to communicate that message, you have to be everywhere, but not just anywhere. You have to be everywhere that matters. I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that they just want to be everywhere. No. You can't just be anywhere. You have to be where it matters, everywhere where it matters. So now with the podcast, we work with a lot of brands. A lot of brands come and say, KS, can we advertise with you? Can you promote us? Can we have a mattress on your set? Things like that. And we say, okay. But we also want to make sure that when we communicate that brand strategy, you don't have to be everywhere. You don't go to a client and say, you have to be on TikTok, you have to be on Twitter, you have to be on Instagram, you have to be on Facebook. You have to see where it works. And that was also important for me in politics. If there is a social media platform which is overwhelmingly anti-KJ or anti-Party X that I represent, why would I be there? There's no point. There's no point in that ubiquity. I want to be where it resonates, where 1 ringgit of my investment yields me 100 times returns on my investment in terms of eyeballs, in terms of people being convinced, in terms of votes, in terms of support. That's where I want to be. So ubiquitousness, where it matters. S, smart. Smart meaning you have to have the data. It has to be actionable, and you build in certain nudges so that you get the right outcome. And that's behavioral science or whatever you want to call it. But it's important that that message is not just static. It's not just words. It's words that lead to a call of action. That's very, very important. So smart messaging. And the last T is timely. Not everything is urgent, and not everything can wait. I remember in politics, someone said you have to reply within 3 hours. And then I did that at first. Everything within 3 hours, reply. And sometimes you have to wait because you have to let the dust settle. If you reply when the anger and toxic level is at the max, nobody's going to listen to you. So you got to let that settle first. Of course, when it's something urgent, when a plane's gone missing, or when, for instance, the number of COVID cases today rise by 100,000, you got to communicate that quickly before the news cycle evades you. But if it's something that you think needs a bit more nuance, whatever it is that you have to reply and reply with cannot drown out that noise, you wait a while. You wait for a second. And you strike when you think it's opportune. So timing matters. It's not the first one out of the block, especially during a crisis. You have to evaluate whether it's worthwhile going quickly or you wait and you let things settle down first. I wanted to end by sharing with you the downside of my journey now. So somebody once said to me, KJ, after politics now, you've become this broadcaster, podcaster, DJ, you're modeling baju Melayu, you're becoming an ambassador for drinks, zero sugar, by the way. You're not a person anymore. You're a brand. You've become a brand. So where do you go with this brand? So I thought long and hard about this, about my situation in life right now, that I've become this brand. And I am overwhelmed by a lot of questions which I cannot answer because I've never regarded myself as a brand. Because as a brand, what do I stand for? I mean, I knew what I stood for as a person, as a politician, but I don't know what I stand for as a brand right now. I'm everywhere, everything, all at once. What are my values? What is my true north? What is my mission? How much is my brand worth? I don't know. Because I get competing quotes. And sometimes they're so different. So I don't know what I'm worth. I know Jake doesn't pay me enough. That much I know. That much I know, Jake. Who or what does the brand want to be associated with? I mean, I get offers all the time. I have to be so careful because, right now you don't know what brand is halal, kosher, what brand isn't. Now I'm very mindful about this, and I'm very, very careful not to get carried away because these things can come back to haunt you. Especially this turn in my life where I've decided to become very public. If there's anything that I've learned from the diesel subsidy rationalization, is that old videos can come back to haunt you. And I've made a lot of videos in the last year. I don't want this to haunt me. And I don't want to get carried away because I may be a brand today, but I'm also just a man. I'm fallible. I'm fallible. I don't want to be a brand or an icon or an idol or hero to people because I will let you down. And I think that's the first thing that you need to realize when you are in this public eye. I have seen so many KOLs being cancelled and brands being boycotted. I've also lost elections, so I know what it is to be cancelled. So there must be humility in all this process. No matter how many followers you have, no matter how many likes, hits, eyeballs you report to your clients, there has to be humility in all of this. That at the end of the day, behind the brand, behind whatever it is that you're trying to sell, and in my case, brand KJ, it's just some guy that's gonna disappoint you one day. I'm not Rick Astley, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down. I'm gonna let you down one day. And you have to remember that social media is not the real world. It's not your family. It's not your friends. Yes, participate in this great dance that your industry supports and propels, but just remember at the end of the night, at the end of the dance, the music ends and you have to go home. So what happens after this to me? I don't know. I don't know. But I hope that I'll be able to communicate that well to you when I decide. Thank you very much.